We all want fame. We all want acknowledgement, recognition from this world, and that is exactly what we are striving for. But do you know of someone जिसने अपने lifetime में बहुत काम किया, wonderful work, exceptionally extraordinary work, but she gained fame and recognition only after her death? That's Emily Dickinson for you. And today I, Dr. Anamta Rizvi, a UPSC English Literature faculty, is going to discuss a very important poet, that is Emily Dickinson, American poet, a 19th century American poet whose fame completely rests on her wonderful poetry, and she's one of the most important American poets. Why? Why is Emily Dickinson so important now? So today the topic is the psychology of loneliness. What Emily Dickinson can teach Gen Z, you all. So that is exactly why I've taken Emily Dickinson. Why? Because her poetry had elements of loneliness, of solitude, solitariness. She talked about death. She talked about things that nobody had so far talked about. And because her focus was so much on the restlessness of the mind, कि मुझे लगा कि, for the Gen Z generation, let's discuss this important topic. Why? Because even if it comes in your question answers or in interviews or for any other matter, you should know about Emily Dickinson, one of the most important, most significant female poets of the American literature. And yes, this is the lesson for you all. So guys, going ahead with this, so as we talk about that, Emily Dickinson was born in Massachusetts, and she was born in the year 1830. She lived a fairly long life, but unki jo poetry hoti thi, that revolved around the idea of death. Because I could not wait for death, or I heard a fly buzz, waiting for death. All these are concepts that she basically wrote in her poetry. Just a second, guys. So when we talk about this, just a minute, please give me a yes. So going ahead with this. So when we discuss Emily Dickinson, one must remember that we are talking about a poet, a female poet, whose popularity was just not at that time, but how she became so prominent that we have her as a major discussion even today. So born in USA, Massachusetts, she lived most of her life in a family home and became known for being very, very private, very reclusive. Emily Dickinson hardly stepped out of her house. आज के literary scholars discuss करते हैं कि was she mentally unwell, but there's nobody ever diagnosed कि clinically कोई इसको problem थी, clinically psychological issue थे. However, she was aware that she's creatively a creative genius, and she used that creativity, not going out, mingling with any other human being, but being in a room and writing poetry, and that's all. She never disclosed all this to her family as well. After her death, her sister discovered a full book, around 1800 poems. After her death, her sister discovered that this is all written by Emily, and was her sister who got these works published. Okay, so guys, she wrote around 1800 poems, all discovered after her death, and though only a handful were published during her lifetime, and even those were often changed by editors. So hardly कोई ऐसा recognition था कि एमिली को मिला. वो देती थी, अपना नाम नहीं बताती थी, disclose नहीं करती थी, anonymously लिखती थी. But then it was only after कि ये एमिली डिकिंसन की poem है, ये after her death ही हुआ. So her poetry is unique for short lines, slant rhymes, and frequent use of dashes. If you read her poetry, you will get to know कि उस time पे 19th century में जब एक romantic era का wave था, वहीं पे Emily Dickinson was using a very unconventional style and experimental style to write poetry. Then moving ahead, so we have Emily Dickinson wrote the way she did because she used poetry to express her inner thoughts, her inner emotions, inner turmoil, confusion, chaos, जो भी उसके दिमाग में था, because she was a creative genius. And ऐसे लोगों के लिए, you need to have an outlet. जो energy, you need to unleash that energy, and that energy was only be able to release by her pen. Okay, so when we talk about this, living in isolation gave her a chance to observe life from a distance and then be a commentator on that. Even a subject as difficult to fathom as death. She used to write a lot about death. अगर उसकी poems देखें, because I could not stop for death, hope is a thing with feathers, I'm nobody, who are you? इसके poems में never was there a heading. There was no headline. There was always हमेशा इसकी poems ऐसी लिखी जाती थी, like stanza by stanza. And if you are seeing this, because I could not stop for death, that's not a heading. That's not the header for the poem. That's the first line of the poem. That is how Emily Dickinson wrote his work. wrote her work. Sorry. Now let's talk about the psychology of loneliness, what Emily Dickinson can teach Gen Z. Let's talk about this. Solitude as a choice, not a deficiency. So if you say that Emily Dickinson lived a very reclusive life, not out of weakness. Living a reclusive life was not her weakness, but she knew कि जो उसके अंदर creative ability है, जो उसके अंदर एक potential है, कि उसको that she has to unveil to the world, unleash to the world, एक unfurl करना है उसको, and that can only be done by writing poetry. So, but as a conscious act of self-preservation and intellectual freedom. She knew that her thoughts might not align with other people. Other people might think or tag her as not normal. So she chose that. She chose that solitude. Usne choose kiya tha very consciously. Not because she just wanted to alienate from the world. Now, she found solitude empowering. It gave her mental space for introspection. So solitude and loneliness में एक difference होता है. जो loneliness आजकल के Gen Z, especially जो generation बहुत associate करता है उसके साथ. Loneliness is a very negative connotation वाला word. It talks about that, how you can get aloof, depressed, alienated from the society, and ultimately those thoughts may lead you to some terrible activities. However, when you talk about solitude is a very positive feeling because, sometimes it is good to be alone. It is good to be in a solitude state. Why? Because it makes you introspect. Retrospect करेगा, आप think करेंगे, आप अपने कमियों के बारे में जानेंगे, उसके बारे में सुधार करेंगे. Solitude is something जो Emily Dickinson करती थी. Her lifestyle challenges the modern notion that constrained social engagement equates to mental well-being. So, we always think that, just to be out there, get into social, networking and all, that's all very good. But to have your own time, that is not loneliness. To have your own time in a positive way wherein you are harboring good positive thoughts apne khud ke liye, that is solitude, which is something that Dickinson was also doing. Gen Z, often surrounded by digital noise, can learn to appreciate intentional solitude as a form of strength. So ye jo solitude hai, make it as a strength. Do not go in towards the lane of loneliness. उस राह पे मत जाओ, बट एक सॉलिट्यूड जो अपने अंदर आप लोग रेट्रोस्पेक्ट करोगे, इंट्रोस्पेक्ट करोगे, देखोगे व्हाट्स रॉन्ग, हाउ वी कैन इंप्रूव एज दैट इज अ वेरी वंडरफुल फीलिंग, समथिंग दैट इज एडवोकेटेड बाय Dickinson. Dickinson retrieved from the world teaches that solitude, when chosen, cultivates authenticity, genuinity, reality, and it makes you rooted. It makes you look into yourself. So this is something that we have. Next we talk about is emotional honesty over social performance. Dickinson expressed feelings of despair, anxiety, and melancholy with stark honesty in her poetry. Even if she's talking about her, the most negative feeling, there's complete honesty in her work. वो अपना जितना भी emotional turmoil था, वो बिल्कुल बाहर निकाल के अपनी poetry में लिख देती है. And when you read her poetry, you can feel the depth of emotions. कितना substance है उनके work में. So she avoided any emotional performance. Her work reflects deep private truths instead of any public personas. She's not targeting anyone. अपने जिंदगी के बारे में जो उसके experiences हैं, she's just talking about that. In contrast, if we talk about Gen Z, often feel pressure to project curated versions of themselves on social media. Authenticity is something that is lacking in this generation. And if we learn to be authentic and not have the masks of pretensions, जैसे हैं हम वैसे हैं, genuine है, real है, this is how I am. जैसे Emily Dickinson ने बोला, this is my life. Accept me. This is the way I am. So exactly, Gen Z, if we talk about this, the idea of pretense, the idea of I have it all, the idea that, that I am a winner throughout, that is not possible. That's not does make you a human being. So Gen Z can learn this from Emily Dickinson if you read the poetry, that be authentic, be genuine as much as you can. Dickinson's refusal to mask emotions validates the power of being inwardly truthful rather than outwardly perfect. Her work provides a blueprint for expressing emotions authentically without any public validation. Okay, as much as we want, public validation, we want everybody to notice us. Emily Dickinson is like, what is the point? Be genuine, be authentic. The world might notice you ultimately. Dickinson ने क्या कौन सा ऐसा लोगों के पास जाके validation लिया? She did not even care for it. However, she ultimately did reach to that level, even if it was after her death. Then you have the paradox of digital connection. Dickinson had very few correspondence but deeply meaningful exchanges. आज की दुनिया में when we want friends to be in thousands, we want followers to be in lakhs, there was somebody who has gained so much of recognition, acknowledgement despite having very few correspondence. She just focused on her work. Her poem, The Soul Selects Her Own Society, a very beautiful title as well, a beautiful poem. The soul selects her own society. जो soul होती है ना, कहते हैं, you attract your tribe. You go to your tribe. Do not try that hard. So it's like capture the selective nature of true connection. Gen Z may have hundreds of online contacts, yet what are the friends that you genuinely have? Okay, so always remember that, as be with those your soul feels nourished with. Okay, this is something that, you can, these ideas you can inculcate. Emily Dickinson ka, agar kabhi koi question hai, or maybe in the interview or anything that can, even as general knowledge, that, how you can put Emily Dickinson with Gen Z. Okay, so this is an ethics paper में भी काम आ सकता है आपका, in any other interviews में, or you never know, in your main paper, GS paper as well. So Dickinson teaches the value of slow, thoughtful and intentional communication, something that's meaningful, that gives you, that nourishes your soul, and it helps you in becoming a better human being. So her life questions the assumption that hyperconnectivity results in genuine emotional bonds. So जो hyperconnectivity है ना, give it a pause. Genuine bond, something that will take you afar. So whatever that you're dreaming, aiming for, does not come with immense validation, but exactly what the person you are, कौन से souls आप ढूंढ रहे हो, खुद के क्या हो, and what you want, what you're aiming for in life. Then you have resistance to social conformity. Dickinson resisted societal expectations of marriage, appearance, and domesticity. So Dickinson, we know she was unconventional in her writing as well as in her life. उनकी पर्सनालिटी अनकन्वेंशनल थी. जो सोसाइटल, जो ऐसे पोएट्स होते हैं ना, ऐसे फिगर्स होते हैं, वी ऑलवेज नो दैट दे क्वेश्चन एंड चैलेंज द अथॉरिटी इन द मोस्ट स्टार्क वेज. दे विल नॉट एक्सेप्टेड, नहीं एक्सेप्ट करेंगे कि डोमेस्टिसिटी, जो कि उस टाइम पे 19th सेंचुरी में वुमेन वर ओनली फॉर द private sphere. They were only for the home. But Emily Dickinson rejecting that was exceptionally visionary. So now she wrote an unconventional meter, syntax, defined poetic norms. She defied. Poetry में भी देखो, उसने defy किया, नहीं लिखा. जैसे सब लिख रहे थे, नहीं लिखा. मुझे अपने तरीके से लिखना है. So why do we have to have a herd mentality? Why do we have to follow what everyone is following? So Gen Z faces intense pressure to confirm the trends, the roles. अगर एक ने trend किया है, we got to go ahead. But why not to make your own mark? Why not to make sure that whatever we are doing, we are creating an impact? And how does? Instead of following everyone, have your own opinions, have your own thoughts, learn to voice them out. So Dickinson's life models intellectual and moral courage to live and think independently. Now, art as a psychological outlet. Dickinson ki 1800 poems, many exploring death and doubt, metaphysical fear, and all psychological terrain often left unspoken. So many things which we do not talk about. I've never seen anybody, Gen Z ever thinking of anything that's beyond the current situation. But if we talk about the idea of the concept of life after death or death, okay, so these are such difficult, challenging topics. Nobody wants to discuss that. I don't want to make a class on that. I don't want to talk about death at all. But Emily Dickinson was going it from in a very unconventional style. Poetry became her method of processing the unknown, the painful, and the transcendent. Gen Z fights with mental health issues such as depression and existential anxiety, and art remains a very powerful coping mechanism. If you have that ability to make sure that you are coping in life in some way or the other. It might be writing, it might be your any physical activity, it could be just unleash the energy that's within you. All right, so we know that we are the human being is made of energy. जब तक वो channelize नहीं होगी, we cannot come into our normal selves. So Dickinson's quite creative output exemplifies the therapeutic function of disciplined private expression. A disciplined private expression is something that, she has always followed it, and that is what she propagates. Then you have death as contemplation, not as panic. Contemplation, a beautiful, beautiful aspect of death. Contemplate what exactly is it. Not the scare, not the panic, not the idea that ultimately sabko to mortal hai, everybody has to die. Not that idea, but what exactly is it? So this is exactly, उसने बहुत इस पे explore किया है. And I know that, as young students, as young scholars, nobody wants to go ahead with this. But just to see that, what ये aspect भी life का एक बहुत बड़ा perspective देती है. So she explored mortality as part of spiritual country, not merely an end. Gen Z, we face anxieties about mortality, be it through pandemics, climate crisis, or personal loss. But do we ever talk about death? So her work encourages philosophical engagement. When you talk about such difficult topics, एक philosophical discourse बनता है, एक collective thinking develop होती है, and that is important for not only as हमारी growth के लिए, but as a growth for the entire society with death rather than any emotional avoidance. and इसके बारे में मत बात करो. Okay, so this is something, I think, that needs to be curtailed. Dickinson's vision helps reframe death as an invitation to reflect on the purpose and impermanence of life. तो वो death को बात करिए डराने के लिए नहीं, but to talk about, it's a very vital important concept. Okay, and that is the impermanence of life. Immortal है कोई नहीं, the mortality of life. Then you have ambiguity in love and identity. Dickinson poems often contain gender-neutral expression of love, suggesting complex or ambiguous emotional experiences we may go through. And this is a very important point when we talk about today's generation. So she depicts longing, absence, and desire in subtle ways, resisting romantic idealization. She's like, we think of romantic stories as something that's, they meet, they marry, and happily ever after. Is it like that? Not at all. Emily Dickinson was the one to explore love in its harshest ways. Loneliness, longing, absence, yielding. Okay, so unrequited love. So in a time when Gen Z navigates fluid identities and non-traditional relationships, Dickinson's works feel profoundly modern, and her restraint in expressing love affirms that emotional truth, जो भी हमारे emotional truth होता है, need not to be loud or overt to be meaningful, but it has to have some substance, some meaning. So that is ambiguity in love and identity. The last one, we have the ethics of introspection. Dickinson, in her turn, was not escapism, but a philosophical choice to examine the self. तो ये जो अपने खुद के अंदर Dickinson was looking within herself, it was not of isolation, not alienation, but whatever that she was as a person, she wanted to know herself more. Writing helped her to do so. Okay, so her poetry often explores conscience, उसका खुद का conscience, उसका जो faith है, because faith is a thing जो कि क्या हमेशा persistent रहता है. Even the most pious people are like, why is this happening with me? Why is God doing this? Is there God? She was constantly she was looking into conscious faith, doubt, and moral agency. For UPSC students, guys, Dickinson offers an ethical model of introspection and interdiscipline, something, again, I'm saying that Emily Dickinson is a very important poet. You can use it for your exam. You can use her poems. Literature एक ऐसा subject है कि उसके quotes, उसके जो figures and literary figures है, you can use them in your answers. So know about this, because एक mental health पे, Gen Z के ऊपर, current situation पे बहुत अच्छे questions frame हो सकते हैं. Use her, use in your answers and make it very rich. So she exemplifies how silent observation and reflective living can yield a very profound ethical insight and add a lot of meaning to your life. So guys, with this, I'm coming to an end. For such more interesting lessons, do follow the channel, like my video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed. And also, UPSC English literature students जिन्होंने opt किया है literature as the subject, English literature as their optional subject, the batch is ending on 13th May. Make sure that you are a part of it. इसमें entire UPSC syllabus cover हो रहा है, and the notes are being given. Every single text is being discussed in detail. You are not going to have a problem in anything. Answer writing से लेकर test series, UPSC में कौन से questions पूछे गए हैं, कौन से questions आ सकते हैं, your entire test series would be provided to you. So if yes, you're going ahead with it, do be a part of this journey and succeed in becoming a good civil servant. Thank you everyone, and I hope to see you in my next class.